This is Etienne Charles, and you are listening to Blockport TV. Etienne Charles, you have the new album, Carnival, The Sound of a People. Can you tell the people a little bit about the concept behind it? So the concept was simply about highlighting the sounds and rituals of my people of Trinidad and Tobago, specifically with respect to our yearly ritual of Carnival. There's so many different sounds and traditions that happen during the Carnival season. And so many people I meet when I tell them I'm from Trinidad, they be like, oh yeah, the steel pan, oh yeah, calypso, and that's that. And I wanted to show that we have like this whole world of sounds there, and that we have this whole tradition that's clearly linked to our ancestors. So it was about the sounds and the energies and how they change people, how they make people think about more than just current events, how it makes people transcend, how it makes people communicate with their ancestors, how it makes people become a blue devil, how it makes people become a Dame Lorraine, that the art of that sound that caused a transformation. That's what the album, that's what the concept was. Because I heard Charlie Brown, I heard funk, I heard, Caribbean, I heard a lot of different sounds in there. One particular thing in the show that struck me, you told us the story about the enslaved African who was dipped in molasses and killed in molasses. Can you tell us, why'd you include that into the album? What is that story about, and why did you include that on your album? Yeah, so Jab Molasses is kind of like for me, it's one of the most important characters in the album, because it was the mask that I first started studying for this album, and it's also one of the first costumes that I ever played as a child was Jab Molasses. And so I wanted to learn that history, and it's a very important history. It's very important for people to be reminded of the atrocities of the African enslavement that happened. It's important for people to know that it wasn't just people working for no pay. It's important for people to know that there was some severe dehumanizing acts that were done, and brutal crimes against humanity that programmed generations to be unfair. And so Jab Molasses for me is a way to communicate to people that these things should not ever be done again, and people need to know that these things actually happen. I mean, there's so many different ways that that enslaved Africans were tortured or punished, and so but Jab Molasses is this carnival costume. Like when I first learned about Jab Molasses, I never knew anything about it being linked to African enslavement or anything like that. I just knew that it was Jab Molasses, and once I started digging, I realized that it's actually our ancestors communicating to us through like generation to generation, to communicate to us that this is the type of suffering that can happen. People need to pay attention to it, because the prison industrial complex is real, and it's it's the same as enslavement. And so that's something I feel very strongly about, that 400 years later, there's still people who are basically enslaved here, and that's a problem that people aren't addressing. They're not talking about it like they should be. Well, you also brought up bit that you're from the colonial French territories of the West Indies. You brought up Haiti, and the struggles of Haiti. Why Haiti? First Black Republic. We're not Black History Month without the Haitian Revolution. Toussaint Louverture, Henri Christophe, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. They led this unbelievable revolution, and it inspired uprisings all over the Americas. you know. And Haiti is just a powerful place. Like their music, their culture is still very African. And another reason is because we need to be reminded of these stories of empowered African descendants in the New World. Too many times the stories that we hear are about the tragedies or you read a lot about great musicians, you read a lot about great writers, you read a lot about great athletes, but story of a black army, with 1/3 of the army being woman, beating the French.
Napoleon.
That's a powerful story.
Beating Napoleon,
exactly, beating Napoleon's, yeah. And that's a powerful story that I think more young people should know about. Like we should know about what types of power is there. Like Stokely Carmichael's my cousin. He's the guy that coined the term Black Power. So it's important. And we here in San Francisco. We here right by Oakland. This music is a way for us to communicate. You can call it what you want. But at the core, it's a means for us to communicate, to engage people. So when I write and when we play, it's about, I'm communicating. I want to communicate history. I want to communicate the present. I want to communicate as much as I can through metaphors and through sounds, just to let people know that we have this going on.
You bring up a very interesting cross section. You said that Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture is your cousin.
Mm-hmm.
Spike Lee punk ass just got an award for glamorizing an FBI agent that infiltrated Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that? Be it that that's your family member and he got his first Oscar, not for Bamboozle, not for Malcolm X, but for glamorizing and portraying a pig in our struggle.
Yeah, well, I watched the movie. I was not familiar with that story.
It's in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I saw, but I wasn't familiar before the movie. But I did see, that they had Ture in the movie. It's interesting. I'm not really up on, like, I don't keep up with pop culture, and I don't keep up with, like, I didn't watch the Oscars. I mean, I was happy that that they're acknowledging black creativity.
When it serves their interest, though, right?
Exactly, but it's challenging. And you can say the same thing about Green Book in a strange way.
About what?
About Green Book, the other movie that won. I think they won Best Picture. Mine's the Oscar. Mine's Hollywood. Like Hollywood. Hollywood was founded on. I mean, the first biggest blockbuster hit was Birth of a Nation. You go throughout the history, and what it was used for is to create, stereotypes. That's what the media is for, and and a lot of times the movies would make long versions of that to create these stereotypes, create these fears. I'm definitely one. I mean, Malcolm X is a very powerful movie for me that Spike did, and I think, it would have been great for him to win an Oscar for that. But
that was before the Navy contracts.
But do we do this for? I don't do stuff for awards. If I were to base my work on if I could or could not get an award, I wouldn't even know how to start, because that's not my process. And I think, we live in a time when people starting to value accolades more than they actually value the substance of the work. Now, I'm not saying that is all the time, but I'm seeing like a pattern where like people are doing an album with the purpose of winning a Grammy. as opposed to just like making some beautiful music. You know, people are making movies and they want to make sure like we gotta make sure that the story is, that it's changed. Like the art is not the primary focus anymore. I don't know. I mean, and of course, I'm not saying everything is like that. You know, I'm saying that there's certain instances that I've seen. And yeah, that's why I don't watch the award ceremonies. Right? I don't watch the Oscars. I don't watch the Grammys. Like, yeah.
Well, that leads me to another question: is how do you keep the political integrity that you have and that your family has when you're in a genre of music that has a large white following, and Black Power music beyond even jazz, period, whether we talk hip hop, reggae, usually is talking to white people even though it's made for Black people. How do you negotiate that as an artist?
It's important to play the music for everybody you can. I sometimes think about the fact that this music, if you look at the history of this music, it started where it started, and it developed, through the ballrooms and then the clubs. There's been an evolution, and now this music is in the walls of academia, it's in Carnegie Hall, and the patronage, has had that, they have definitely different percentages based on demographic. For me, when I think about that, I just always know that I need to make sure that I can find my people to play this music for as well. So I always educate my audiences, in a sense that, it's not like, oh, this is that and this is that, but it's more like, think about this. What do you think about that? This is what I think about it, and I put it in a song. The San Jose Suite, we played that album, and that was a tense album to play live because it talks about displaced indigenous people in San Francisco Bay. It talks about how the missions were built. It talks about the gold rush that's happening again now. It goes through. But when I would introduce the tunes, sometimes people would shift. San Jose Suite addresses police brutality. And people would get up and walk out. But at the end of the day, I don't see things as a political side or even being political, because political means that you're doing something to get people to like you so that you can get into power. But I'm just talking about facts, actual history, and actual human rights. It's because somebody's skin is of a different hue, they should not have less or more privileges than you. That's just a fact. I don't see that as a political statement. People ask me, why am I so political? I'm I'm not. This is just human needs, human rights. So, yeah, how do I deal with it? I play, I energize them, and I always encourage my audiences to reach out to their marginalized communities in their towns, because that's the only way that communities will grow and connect, just like we just did here. Communities grew and connect. I saw people swapping numbers. When the community grows, people connect.
I see that you graduated from Juilliard in 2008, and the great Miles Davis also is a graduate of Juilliard. Who inspired you to do music? I know that you don't just have a straight jazz influence like maybe a lot of the people coming from the United States. You also have calypso and other Caribbean sounds, and maybe even other sounds beyond those. But who inspired you, or what inspired you to pick up your horn?
I got a trumpet when I was 10. My uncle sent me a trumpet. What was that? Back then it was no big set of distractions because but we had a little bit of video games. I had a Nintendo, watched TV, a couple channels, no cable, and so I had this trumpet and I started playing it, trying, and then my parents sent me for lessons, and I went to Major Eddie Wade, and I went to Tony Woodruff Brass Institute, and then I studied the music, studied the instrument, bit by bit, developed.
There was no one person or a few people. Did you listen
with the trumpet? I grew up when I was like young teenager. I didn't really listen to much because nobody told me that you needed to be listening to the recording. So I was listening to Stevie Wonder, any record that came out of that type. Wyclef Jean's Carnival was one of my favorite records at that time. Miseducation, Lauryn Hill came out. The Score by Refugee, but no reality. Like that was the type of music I was pumping. And then but when I went to college, I started listening a lot to people like Lee Morgan, Cliff Brown, Louis Armstrong, Freddie Hubbard, Dizzy Gillespie, Clara Bryant, Ingrid Jensen, many great trumpet players, and they became my influence. Nicholas Payton, Roy Hargrove. It's like so many different players and their styles and the way they connect with their ancestors. Like all of that influenced me.
Why is connecting with the ancestors part of it? Or do you tune into like Ifa and the tradition, African traditions that dominate?
Yeah, I think it's very important to communicate with your ancestors somehow, because they're gonna talk to you if you talk to them. Tamu Bambu is connected with the ancestors. Like that's calling the spirits and It's important because it reminds us that we're from something bigger. It's like it gives length to the tree. It makes that tree feel wider and stronger. Oh man, your family in Santa Cruz or Santa Fe or San Jose it's like it just teaches you to understand scope.
With you being a jazz artist and you growing up on hip hop, do you feel a way about MP3 artists or producers? Because your band plays every single note. You play every single note. There is no loops or nothing like that. How do you feel about hip hop now that you're a trained artist? But even before you was trained, you were an instrumentalist.
It's funny, right? Because in Bitches Brew, Miles is making loops. On certain track, they're making loops.
He was doing it live?
They made loops. They looped parts in the studio, and then that's how they put that together. Yeah, it's interesting. Sidney Bechet was doing overdubs and overdubbing, stacking a bunch of tracks as well. It's an interesting question because hip hop. When I listen to hip hop, hip hop, in the Americas, hip hop was the vocal hype music, like it's music that like uplift people. But its origins are in the Caribbean, strongly. And so when I listen to hip hop record that's like 8 bars of a jazz record or whatever R&B record, and then they make a loop of that, it's kind of like what I did with Freedom. It's like you taking a sound that you hear from the ancestors or somebody that came before you, and you put something on it, you use it. And so that's a strong thing when you know that your purpose is to connect. That's a strong thing, because they come to speak to you if you're listening for them. And the album comes out March 22nd. It's Carnival, The Sound of a People, Volume 1. And it's going to be available, of course, on my website. It'll be available on iTunes, Google Play, Apple Music, Amazon MP3, Deezer, not all platforms. It'll be available on CD and vinyl as well on my website. And I hope you support live music and the album.